Something like this has happened to every musician I've ever met. You hit a wall with the project, and just when you most need to stay strong and keep going, instead, under pressure, you choke. Here's what that can look like. The grant application sits open in a tab for 3 weeks and you miss the deadline. Or the email pitch to the presenter gets drafted, then deleted, then drafted again and again, but never sent. In both situations, you're attempting to put yourself forward where you'll be judged. Someone else calls the shots, win or lose, the grant committee or the concert series presenter. You don't get a vote. And the stress over whether you'll be picked or passed over is exactly why we choke. Musicians describe two things that happen on the way to the choking moment: comparing yourself to others and craving external validation. Let's start with the comparison issue. Before you write a word of the grant application or the email pitch, you pull up the list of last year's grant recipients or review who the presenter has booked in the past. And some part of you starts passing judgment. So-and-so has played better venues, has more followers, more experience. You think they're qualified. I'm not. This may feel like research. It isn't. It's compare and despair. It takes what may start out as legitimate research and uses it to convince you to take yourself out of the running. As for craving external validation, this is why the stakes of our email pitches and grant applications feel almost unbearably high. We fantasize that a positive result will offer us the proof that we are, at last, good enough. It's not just the fear of rejection that can stop us in our tracks. It's that once we put ourselves out there, no matter what the results are, we've sacrificed the dream we've held dear, the fantasy that someone out there in the future will pronounce us worthy and that we'll believe it. That's a lot to put on the line in order to move forward. Compare and despair and the craving for validation are just two of the many traps that cause musicians to choke. But underneath all of them is the same thing: the fear of not being good enough. Hi, I'm Angela Beeching, and I help musicians sidestep the choking so they can put themselves forward with confidence. A colleague of mine, Sue Campbell, is a coach who helps writers overcome inner obstacles that get in the way of putting their work into the world. When I read her recent piece on the distinction between two very different inner voices that drive this fear, I knew immediately that musicians needed to hear this too. What follows is based on her work and expanded for the particular challenges musicians face. What I've learned over the years is this: choking isn't a willpower problem. It's a case of fighting the wrong enemy with the wrong weapons. Most musicians, when they hit a wall with the project, reach for one of these, telling themselves, I'm not disciplined enough, or I just need to force myself to do the work, or I don't see other musicians struggling with this. What the hell's the matter with me? That's our attempt to bully, shame, and guilt ourselves into taking action. And here's why it doesn't work. Because behind the fear of not being good enough are two very different voices with two very different agendas. And they require completely different responses. Use the wrong approach on either one, and you'll make things worse, not better. To further complicate matters, you cannot tell which voice you're dealing with by which symptom shows up. The only way to discern what's behind the voices you hear is by paying attention to the tone and energy of the message. Does it sound contemptuous or does it sound scared? Let me introduce you to both voices, because once you can tell them apart, everything changes. The first is what writer Stephen Pressfield calls resistance and Phil Stutz calls part X. This is the one that shows up the moment you open that grant application and it berates you with, who do you think you are? Or everyone else applying has way more impressive credentials than you. or this is a waste of time. You haven't got a chance. Its aim is to cut you down. Part X doesn't offer constructive criticism or perspective. What it wants is to extinguish your life force. It's not spewing wisdom, it's spewing hate. The best way to lessen the impact of Part X is to label it as quickly as possible, because naming it as a force outside of you is what breaks its grip. You can't eliminate it. It's part of life. The moment you see Part X as a character instead of your inner truth, it loses an enormous amount of its power over you. But Part X is relentless, so you need to be on the lookout for it always. Label it whenever you detect it in action. Cursing is optional. Oh, there you are again, you shithead, caught you. Or, I hear you trying to sabotage me and we're not having it. Think of Part X as the enemy of your artistic soul. The other voice is different, and it deserves a completely different response. Call it your shadow. Or if you know internal family systems, call it a protective part. This voice isn't trying to sabotage you. It's trying to protect itself and you from disappointment. Our shadows are formed early on, often by an early rejection that bruised us badly. Your work isn't to silence this part or muscle past it. It's to build a safe and trusting relationship with it. Here is what's rarely noticed. The craving for external validation doesn't start with a desire for attention and praise. It comes from a part of you that doesn't believe in your heart of hearts that you're worthy. And it's hoping someone whose opinion you respect can tell you that you are, and that finally you'll believe it. That's not ego and vanity. That's an old wound looking for healing in the wrong place, outside of you. And that's why it never sticks. Even when the grant committee says yes, and for a few days you feel legit, that feeling fades quickly, and you're scanning for the next validation fix that might finally get you to believe in yourself. But what about when the answer is no? When you apply and are rejected, or the bookings don't come through? Part X has a field day. See, I told you so, you're a certified loser. And your shadow is devastated. And you, the musician, take that rejection as an indictment of your worth as a human being. The wound stays untouched because it was never going to be healed through anything external to you. What you and your shadow needed a long time ago was a blessing from a caring adult, someone who saw you clearly and said, you are enough. Many of us never got that. And so we spend our adult lives looking for it in grant awards, presenter replies, a mentor's praise, or an audience's standing ovation. But the truth is, that blessing can only come from one place now, from you to yourself. When you learn to befriend your shadow, to turn toward it with the same calm assurance you'd offer a student or a colleague who didn't yet believe in their own abilities, you start building the kind of self-esteem that can actually weather rejection. Your shadow, who ultimately wants nothing more than to see you succeed, can eventually become your greatest ally against Part X. So how do you tell in the moment which voice you're dealing with? Ask yourself one question. Is this voice contemptuous, or does it seem scared? If it's contemptuous, telling you that you're not enough, that's your resistance, that's Part X. The most effective thing you can do is label it. Don't try to argue or reason with it. Logic won't work. You just have to stop mistaking it for your own truth and dare to take action despite its trash talking. And if the voice feels more like caution, if it sounds less like contempt and more like the fear of getting hurt again, that's a protective part. That's your shadow. And what that part needs isn't to be silenced. It needs conversation. You can actually ask it directly, what are you afraid will happen if we do this? And then wait. Don't rush past the answer. Usually what comes back isn't about the grant or the email pitch. It's about an old disappointment that your shadow is still trying to protect you from. This is the piece almost nobody tells musicians. You don't need to defeat the shadow. You need to build a relationship with it. Let it know you hear it. Let it know that you, the adult, capable musician sitting right here now, are willing to handle whatever happens next, including getting a rejection. Here's the truth underneath all of this. External validation was never going to fix the underlying issue, because there will always be a new challenge, a new fear. And without this inner work, you'll keep looking for love in all the wrong places. So the next time you find yourself stalled, staring at an application or an email pitch you can't bring yourself to send, don't reach for the same old weapons. Trying to force yourself to power through doesn't work. Reach for the question instead. Is this voice contemptuous or is it scared? If it's contemptuous, that's part X, your enemy. Name it and move forward anyway. If it's scared, that's your shadow, your ally. Listen to it and tend to it as you move forward together. Building that relationship with your shadow, that part of you that never learned how to believe in itself, is inside work and it's ongoing. The relationship you have with your shadow is your first relationship and the last one. It's the most important one you'll ever have, because whether you get the grant or the gig was never actually the point. Having the courage to put yourself forward was and always will be. And believing you deserve to do that, that's the gift only you and your shadow can give each other. If you've had more than your share of compare and despair and craving external validation, the link's below if you want to talk. And if you found this video helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe below. Please pass it along to a colleague who might be in need. We are all in this together. See you next time.